and I am the Chief Creative Officer of New Season Books and Media. And we are here for a very special launch. On Tuesday of this week, May 14th, we launched the book Sex and the Church Girl.
Yes!
This book, Sex and the Church Girl, is a wonderful collection of essays. It's a collection of personal stories, personal narratives by 10 authors. A lot of people ask me, how did this book come about? What with the idea, the concept of this book. And I have to be very honest, over the last couple of years, there's been a lot of conversations in the media about sex. Right? Sex? But specifically, a couple of years ago, the rest of the world caught on to what Tarana Burke's work had been for the last decade around Me Too. And so we have to shout out Tarana Burke and her work around Me Too. And out of that, a couple of years ago, Hollywood caught on, and so everyone was saying hashtag Me Too, Me Too. In other words, telling their stories of sexual assault, sexual trauma, and out of that came another hashtag. That hashtag was Church Too. And this was a hashtag where people were sharing their experiences with sexual trauma, sexual assault within the church. The Christian church, and specifically the American church, and their experiences, etc. And when that was happening, I was thinking to myself, you know what, this is a larger conversation. Even beyond sexual trauma, even beyond sexual assault, there's the issue within the church of sex and women, period, and how it's framed, and how sex has, the way that the church has talked about or not talked about sex, lots of head nods, right? Not talked about sex, how that's informed the sexuality of women, how we see ourselves. I am very intentional about centering the voices of Black women, so as you see on this table, and as you will notice in the book, all of the stories are written by women of color, African American women. And so we wanted to talk about our experiences and be very transparent about sex. And then, about a year ago, Candace and I took a trip to New York to watch a panel discussion for the release of She's Gotta Have It. Spike Lee's She's Gotta Have It, the reboot of that, and we got into this conversation at the diner about just the things that we wish we would have known about sex. We wish someone had had a conversation with us about sex. Specifically, beyond, don't do it, keep your legs closed.
Until you're married.
Right. Yeah, don't do it until you're married and then do a lot of it, even though nobody told you how to do it after you get married, right? So we got a chance to kind of chat, and that's when I said, you know what, this is a book, this is a docuseries, this is something, and from that, Sex and the Church Girl, the book was born. So this book is really about sharing stories. New Season Books our mantra is that we believe that stories can facilitate healing. That when you share, when we talk here, we give our stories air, something happens for you watching, for those of you who are here. It almost frees you up to say, oh, it's where Me Too comes from, right? It's like, oh, someone else has gone through what I've gone through, or something about that story resonates. And so really what we hope this book will do is help take some of the weight off of you, help you to know that there are other women out there that have had those experiences, and hopefully challenge the church to do better. Yeah. To challenge the church to say that, having this conversation or not having this conversation is not okay. Not when we have things happening. I mean, you check your news today, a lot of decisions are being made for women and about our bodies without our input. And those who do have input don't have been victims of their own internalized misogyny. So let me just dive in. I'm going to read really quickly the bios of each speaker. Yeah. I have to let the people know who you are. So right here next to me Raina Chambliss. Raina is an aspiring writer by night and office staff at the Community College of Philadelphia by day. She holds an associate's degree in business from CCP and a bachelor's degree in strategic communication from Temple University. She was born and raised right here in Philly, and we were just talking about this. She's an avid Prince fan, so we know what her sexuality. Wait a minute. We can read all about it actually in her story. Next up, we have, sitting across from me, Felicia Commodore. Felicia Commodore is an assistant professor of higher education in the Darden College of Education and Professional Studies at Old Dominion University in Norfolk, Virginia. She is the lead author of Black Women College Students, A Guide to Success in Higher Education. She is also the immediate past young adult representative of the Connectional Lay Organization of the AME Church. And we have Cindy Swinton Jackson, who's called herself a closet writer, but I had to yank her up out of that closet. You coming out the closet. For over 3 decades. 3 decades of being a closet writer. She's a Christian who moonlights as an artist, dance instructor. Y'all have to take her Zumba class. If you're in Philly, take her Zumba class. It's amazing. And marriage and family therapist. This full-time dreamer is excited about the opportunity to begin to share extraordinary stories with the world. And then finally, last but certainly not least, Candace E. Wilkins is a blogger, speaker, and licensed minister based in Philadelphia. Much of her work explores how faith journeys intersect with the real and practical issues of life. She would call herself a professional starter who has finally learned the secret to buckling down and finishing what she starts. And Candace actually has a book that's dropping June 4th called Letters to the Finishers. She is signed to New Season Books, and we are excited about that launch. And you'll be hearing more on our page, so hang out on our page to hear more. So let's just dive in, because we lost a little time with our technical difficulties. So here's the thing, y'all. Church ain't talking about sex. And when they do talk about it, they talk about it, in my experience at least, with such condemnation. Specifically when it comes to women. A lot of what we are told about sex at very young ages, right, is that it's something that you do when you get married, that it's, there's never really any conversation about pleasure, about desire, at all. Why do you think that sex is still this thing, this taboo in the church? Who'd like to go first?
I think I can. Raina, hi. So one of the things that I think the church tends to tie itself to in America particularly is the moral values of the country, or the alleged moral values of this country. And you know, we talk about the forefathers and how they had all these standards, and there's certain things that we won't legalize here in this country because we feel like we have to uphold some type of morality. And the church seems to fall in line with that, even though it's supposed to be a separation of church and state, the last time I checked. But I think that the church is a little too entangled with government and with the American values as opposed to what the Christian values should be.
But the thing is, the American values are a lie, right?
So
what's interesting about that is this relationship between church and politics, and you know, all the conversations that are happening right now about the abortion laws that are being passed in these various states, right? Like, the problem is that the alignment itself is false. Right? Like, even talking about forefathers and talking about all men are created equal. Well, no, kind of, I wasn't, y'all wasn't, right? We wasn't, right? So this idea of aligning yourself with a lie. But for me, I don't even think it's that. I think it's deeper than that. I think it is a power. It's the same power structures that we see in government, in politics, in the social realm, happening itself, white supremacy is happening itself, patriarchy happening within the church, right? And it's a mechanism to keep people under control, right? Because I don't believe the Bible intended that. If we read the stories of the Bible, what your pastor is preaching often does not align. We're talking especially about, if he's talking about sex, doesn't align with the stories of the Bible. Alexis Rome, who's probably online right now and was on her way here and the flight got canceled, so we miss you, Alexis. Sending you all the love. She wrote in her essay that, the Bible isn't a sex manual. And she breaks down, if you look at the story of David, if you look at like all of the things that we're taught that are law, didn't necessarily apply in these stories. Right? So then how do you make sense of that? How do you reconcile that?
Well, I think also, for me, the way in which, particularly in my experience in Black church traditions, that we view our faith generally and totally as a set of rules in which to protect ourselves, right? And I think when we think about historically how kind of Christianity was mixed into kind of the socialization of Black people in America, religion is one of the ways in which we could protect ourselves, right? The morality portion of it, anyway. So if you abide by certain rules, a certain standard of living, then you were seen as a good person and possibly a good Black person, which ultimately could protect you, right, in certain spaces and places. But with that framing or that framework, I think what has happened is that in order to keep that standard, we had to make anything that's seemingly pleasurable bad, right? So any kind of pleasure, anything you get pleasure out of is your flesh, right? Like it's not, it should be, you gotta kill your flesh daily. It's all about struggle and pushing and straining and striving. And so if this seems like it feels too good, right, whatever it is, it could be not just sex, but anything that seems too pleasurable, right, cannot be spiritual. It cannot be of God, right? And I think sex got pulled into that, right? And so we talk about sex, but we talk about sex as something that is not about pleasure. We talk about sex as something you do that's almost a mandate once you're married to be fruitful,
Procreate.
right? To procreate or to keep your marriage happy, right? Because that makes God happy.
Yeah.
So we took the
because
that also makes God
right.
that makes God happy, make your husband happy.
Right.
And so we take the pleasure out of it, because if you see it as pleasurable, then we mix that with sinful. And I think that has caused us, like I said, to frame sex as a mandate as opposed to something a gift that God has given us to enjoy. And that, I think, has caused a struggle, because then you're like, oh, it is pleasurable, but then you feel guilt because we've been taught that we're not supposed to enjoy things or feel pleasure.
And what's interesting about that is everyone taught that, or women taught that? Because there's a lot of passes given to men, right? Like, I mean, I've heard pastors, I've heard, in council and in deacons say, oh, well, men, they're just gonna have to sow their wild oats.
Yeah.
They're gonna have, there's a season of it's. So is it really that we're taught, or is it that women are taught to not experience pleasure, that we are there for our husband's pleasure, right? Or and then if we decide that we are going to experience that pleasure outside of the context of marriage, then whoa, here we go to the Jezebel, that whole binary, the whole church girl binary, right? That we see. So is it? Why is it? Why do we think that men get the passes?
Yeah. Well, I think everyone's taught it. I think women are held responsible for everybody, right? So I think everybody gets to teach them, but men get the pass because it's our responsibility to keep the men in line, right?
Oh,
And
so that's the reason why we have to cover our
right.
Right, yeah.
So
Because they have no self-control.
the men are only sewing their wild oats because y'all are letting them.
Yeah.
Right. So
Okay.
that therein lies the issue.
I think part of it is too that, when it comes to getting to that point of marriage and, the woman is something to be possessed. So if you have something that you're never going to want, and I hate to put it in this term, but it's almost like this, you're not going to buy anything that's not 100%. So, because you don't want to buy it, it might not work right, it might be broken, it might be faulty, you can't return it. So, if you have a woman who's been used,
Quote unquote.
wow. So she can't be out selling oats, and she can't be out, being a Jezebel, whatever the case may be, because then nobody's
But I
going
don't
to
want
look
no
her
used
up.
package either.
I
If we're going by that logic, I don't buy that logic, but if we're going by that, then why would a woman that is living in that theology want that used package?
Because we don't get to make that choice.
Right.
We don't get to make that choice. We get chosen.
Right.
See,
Right.
we don't get to do the choosing.
Finds a way.
Right, and that's what I'm saying, and I don't agree with that. I mean, don't hear me. Like, I'm not agreeing with that, but I'm just saying that in the context of what we're talking about, we are the ones that we are the ones to get chosen. We do not do the choosing. That's taught. Whether that's said to you, that is the way that it's taught. A man that finds a wife, you got to be found. And when you're found, you have to be the good church girl. Even though, as Felicia and I were discussing yesterday, what kind of breaks down that theology, right, is because, that was sort of where we were early in our college years, trying to be the good. We were saying sanctified, filled with the Holy Spirit. Like, I was going to sleep, you know what I'm saying, with Juanita Bynum's No More Sheets playing. Ourselves, and we've got to keep our quote-unquote number count down. If we're going to engage in sex, we've got to keep the number low. You know what I'm saying? We've got to keep that body count low. But then, so what broke down all of that foolish theology, right, is that the men that they said would be ours, because we kept ourselves, they said that these men would be ours, and those men married the women who they were sending in college. Now, I'm all myself trying to keep up the bloodstained banner. So wait. And then you keep seeing it happen over and over and over again. So that theology is like, wait a minute, this can't be right. So all y'all taught me all these years is wrong. And then you start to learn things about your family, and you start to learn things about the women in the church who were telling you to keep yourself, but baby, you weren't keeping yourself. So still ain't keeping yourself. So it breaks down eventually. You know what I'm saying? But before it breaks down, we buy in. Because they tell us that marriage and a man is the ultimate prize.
And they communicate to us that inherently speaks to our value. Right? So the type of man that chooses us, the type of man that picks us, if a man chooses us or picks us as a wife, is a marker of the value of who we are as women. And so if you're not being chosen, something's wrong with you. Your value is low. And so that in there is the problem. So what are you doing that's making these good men questionable? choose you. Right. And so we are given these messages that no matter all the things you do, all the things you accomplish, how many degrees you get businesses, you start, books you write, whatever you do, ministries you have, if they let you have them. And no matter what you do, at the end of the day, we're taught very early that none of that is as valuable as someone making you their wife. And so somewhere along the line, many of us who are part of these communities, part of these faith communities, who's being a church girl is part of our identity. We are accomplishing all these other things and trying to do all these things they told us to do to be this good church girl, and still not able to reach this thing that had told us makes us the ultimate, is showing us like we're the ultimate prize. And wrapped up very problematically in that God loves us. Right? Because God's going to bless you. When you do all these things, God's going to bless you with a husband. But then when that husband don't show up, not only now am I questioning my value to men and to the church, also I'm questioning my value to God.
And you know what's interesting about that is that, you know, and what's probably very challenging for some people to hear this conversation is because, you know, people have forgotten that help means partner. So this idea of choosing, you know, the woman as opposed to that being a partnership, being, you know, working alongside in the garden, you know, as opposed to that, you know, like people have twisted it to do exactly what you said. And I think what's interesting is that even those women who do all the right things and they get the guy, right? What ends up happening is within marriage, right, they are still unequipped or ill-equipped, even within marriage. So I'm coming to you, Cindy. No. You see how the segue works, right? She said that because your story actually talks about that. You did the thing, right? And you got married, right? In your essay, you talk about that, right? And a lot of people are saying, you know, well, why is it the church's job? We got feedback when the book dropped. A lot of you said, well, why is it the church's job to talk about sex, right? And my thing is, well, by that logic, why is it the church's job to talk about financial education, to talk about entrepreneurship, to talk about anything out of us, you know, that's not necessarily exactly scriptural, right? Like, we do it because God wants us to live abundant, full, you know, lives, right? And so we talk about sex because that is very much a part of who we are as human beings. So sick. I'm a unicorn. You're not a unicorn. But I mean, you talk about how you only heard about sex at school, and then you went off and got married, and then even in doing all the things, you went off and got married, and it is still, you didn't have the equipment to be able to handle it. So tell us a little bit about that. Tell us. Yeah.
The first thing that for me, when because you know we'll get a lot of boo from the church.
Right.
So when we're saying church, we're not talking about a building. We're not talking about an organization. We're not talking about this. We're talking about we are the church, right? The Bible says we are the church. We're talking about people. We're talking about the church.
But can I jump in here?
Yes.
Because yes, we're talking about church, the people,
Yes.
but I am talking about the institutions too. I'm talking about the organizations. Because those people begin to form these LLCs and these nonprofit organizations, and then they put rules and stuff, and then the rules turn into sermons.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure
that turn into things they sell to us because we've bought into this theology. And to capitalize off of
How to get chose conferences.
this.
That conference would do well.
We might want this. That would sell out some longer.
It would.
they don't know how to get chose.
No, they don't know how to get chose conferences.
I'm not
Go
trying
ahead.
to.
But yeah, really, all of that.
Right.
But what was the question?
Oh.
So you're saying, like in marriage,
Yes, and ill-equipped is the word. You know what I mean? And it is the church's responsibility. Whose else's responsibility is it? Because I mean, the people that teach us are part of the church, right? As a church girl, those are the people that teach us. So, you know, when you grow up and it's like we mentioned church being the stigma, is still being a taboo subject, sex. still living. 100 years old. It's like,
First of all,
I'm just saying, you're a mature, an adult. You've had children. You've been married. Absolutely.
Right.
However, you were never properly equipped. Who do you blame? You know what I mean? Is anyone to blame? You learn what you learn in school. I mean, I still remember to this day the first sex education, back when they used to have sex education in school. I'm sex education in school old.
Right.
So being in there and seeing the diagrams and all of that stuff and feeling that sense of shame, even though you didn't even know what you were looking at, is something that if you're not taught, that's something that goes on for the rest of until you learn.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then when you learn by trial and error, you don't really know.
Right.
You're just going with the flow. You know what I mean?
Right.
Which is just being ill-equipped. So in a sense, you can reach a certain age of maturity where you have, all things in life in place and whatever, but in that particular area, you're still almost virginal. You know what I mean? Because you don't know.
And you don't know what you don't know.
You don't know what you don't know. You don't know, you can't experience it through watching television, seeing movies, or talking to other people.
No, you're right.
You
No.
can't. So, there you go.
But what's interesting is that Candace, in your piece, you actually kind of go into that even more, right, in detail. Because part of even being ill-equipped, like, we can talk about the church not teaching us, to embrace our desire and embrace flesh. But, like, the strange thing about the teaching of don't do it, right, is that nobody talks to you. They tell you don't do it.
Period.
And then you said you're supposed to go from nothing to nymph.
Yep.
Right? You're supposed to
Right.
as soon as you get married, you're supposed to be able to turn it out, twist it out, twerk it out, right? And nobody has even had a conversation with you. And what's so interesting about that is I learned something today, y'all. Let me tell you what I learned. I was having a conversation with Alexis. I'm about to bring it up, Alexis. I'm telling you. She was talking about a female sexuality course that she had taken. Do you guys know? And maybe y'all know, and I'm just the one out. My husband is here, so he might be a little embarrassed, but he'll be okay. But do you guys know that there are 14 ways the female body can orgasm?
Yes.
I didn't.
14 ways.
Only 14?
Is there a printout? Is there a printout? Are you passing it out? Share the article.
I think there was 14 ways that the female, 14 ways that your body can physically orgasm, right? That is something, that is a lesson.
God is good because He created my man.
If we believe that God created our bodies, right, and He made both male and female, right, and we believe that, right, and that's part of our faith, and that's our tradition, then why isn't the church telling me that? And especially when
You don't want to find out 1 through 14.
You come from a theological location and perspective that, you wait until you get married. Okay, fine. But when we get married, right, if the older women are supposed to teach the younger women, then, and that's all scriptural, right, then why aren't we having, instead of having to get chose class, be like, once you chose class, how to,
Girls
Because they don't know.
class.
That's it. They don't know.
Because they too are just having sex to please them. And I'm gonna say y'all, some of y'all do.
Some of y'all don't
But some of them, they were taught that sex is for the pleasure of man, right? So they trying to teach you is figure out what he like. What is he like? What do you need to do this? If he saying like this, like long hair, go get you a wig. This, you know, like long hair, get your stuff tight. He like right stuff. You better stay in the gym. You better get right with that, because if you don't do it, somebody else will. Right? So they also like
But they also say no oral sex, no anal sex, no like
people say.
yeah. So what is it? What if I do that? I say, baby, you know, what you into? What you like, baby? Right? And he said, well, you know, I want to get that back door. Oh, no, they told me.
I'm not doing that.
But then they also say that the marriage bed is undefined.
Right.
So which one is it then?
Right.
You can only do certain things, or you can do whatever you want in the marriage bed, or if you don't do anything, somebody else is going to do it, which basically you're allowing the husband to have affairs.
Right. And
You're
you're
teaching
responsible.
them that.
And you're responsible.
Right.
It's like
There's no way.
There's no win. There's no
So
win.
why do you do this? Because you talked about that your own personal kind of, you know, wrapping the complexity and the complications around sex for you in your story. You talk about that.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is though? What do you wish you would have been taught in Sunday school? That's the name of her essay.
I wish they would have taught me that maybe you don't, okay, Sunday school, I get it. You don't want to go to the orgasm. But don't make me ashamed of my body that God created. And that's what I got a lot of, because I do have booty and I have hips and I have thighs and I have, you know what I mean? And I basically, starting in adolescence, I've always had that. And all I ever got from church was cover it up. Buy the skirt 3 sizes too big. You know what I mean? And I'm like, why? You know what I mean? And I am not even I'm gonna, I have to show you. That's not even who I am. But if that's who you are, like, prosper. But that's not me. But that was the shame, like making me ashamed of my body and making me feel like the body that God created. And I think I'm just starting to get like, oh snap, like he created my body the way that he created it. Oh, sex is from him. Oh, orgasms then are also from him. And it's weird, like you have to kind of shift your mind around that, because you're like, orgasms are from God? I'm like, yes, they are. I get all insemination. I think that if they were, what I wish even now, I wish that even with younger girls, I don't want them ashamed of their bodies. I don't want us already, like I have godchildren, and I don't want us policing already, like you got to cover that up. Why? Because what you're teaching them is that something's wrong with me, something's wrong with my body, even though you're not saying that. That's what you're teaching them. And the reason that I know that is because I'm at 30, almost 37, just starting to realize, oh, that was wrong.
Right.
But I don't want those girls to be 37 and just starting to get it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Don't police their bodies. Don't make them ashamed. Don't make them feel like something's wrong with them, or if they got a butt, like now it's their job to cover up so that men don't look at them. If a grown man is looking at a little girl, guess who the problem is with?
Right.
It ain't the little girl. It ain't even the teenage girl. It ain't the woman. It's them.
But you know what's challenging about that, and I want to speak about that because I'm the mother of a 7-year-old, and I find myself, if I'm honest, doing exactly what you're saying. Like my daughter loves to wear everything tight, and it's just her personality. And I find myself, no, put a skirt on top of, and there's this really interesting balance between trying to let her be free, and not be ashamed of her body and not giving her a complex over her body, but dealing with my own stuff. Because for me, the truth is, I know that there are predators out there.
For sure.
And I know that there, because I'm also coming from a place of someone who's experienced sexual trauma and sexual molestation, and so it's my fear at work. I know that, and I think some of even those grandmamas and aunties in the church, while they end up making the woman full of shame, they feel like that's the price you pay.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, then deacon so-and-so is going to be looking up your skirt and touching your butt and and doing all of that.
Yeah.
And so there's this weird tension for me as a mom.
So when both of you are talking, I think about my mom, who I talk about with my parents, and their kind of accidental progressive nature in the books. I don't think they knew what they were doing at all. She was a social worker and a minister and a pastor as I got older. But in part of her time as a social worker, she worked with sexually abused kids. And so she was I feel like that was part of the reason she was very adamant about talking very openly with us about our bodies and about sex and things of that sort. And so I think there's a way, and I don't have any kids, so let me preface that I don't know what it's like when you actually have a little human to take care of and keep alive and stuff. But I think she policed my clothes, absolutely. We have great epic stories of battles in the mall, right? My dad's like, I'm leaving, like I'm about to blow down. But from her standpoint, I think my mom always framed it as a fit issue, right? Like it was never people are gonna be wanting to touch you or do things to you or you're gonna attract the wrong attention. It was always, that just don't look good on you. Right? And then that's where the argument, right? Because I look great. No, you do not. Now everybody's going to talk about me being a ragged mother because you look right? It's always and I think, I think it's so important. Like, I can remember very specific instances of being a little girl in church, and I've always had long legs because I was tall for my age. I always had long legs. And I remember like adults, both men and women, would make comments about my legs. Like either like, oh, she always got her legs out, or oh, she's such pretty legs for a little girl, like whatever. And never do I ever remember my mom being like, we're gonna cover that up. Like whatever. It was always, I remember my mom specifically approaching someone and being like, why are you looking at my daughter's legs? Right? And I think that is for your kid to know that you're not going to turn in on them, but they're not going to shame you for your body. What we're going to talk about is why your body is such a topic of conversation for these adults, right? And I think there probably was some mix of like covering her, because my mom tends to be more conservative. She had paid that. But I don't know that she ever framed it that way with me. Like I said, like I can always remember now that I got other body issues because of the fit thing. But I never felt like ashamed of my body sexually or that my body was the reason these men. Because I also looked older for my age. Like so I had 19-year-olds trying to talk to me when I was 15 and 14, and never do I remember my parents making that my fault. Right? It was like, why are these? What's wrong with these people, right? And I don't know if that's because of where professionally, like she just more so focused outward on predators than on the child. But I think that made a difference in how I viewed myself. So I didn't. Okay, so I walk around all the time like, hey man, you're not comfortable with whatever. I didn't grow up with that shame sexually about my body, although I do think she policed my clothes so that I was dressing appropriate for my age, that I wasn't, I already looked 19 at 15, so we don't have to dress you like a 19-year-old, right? But we're gonna reframe how I say that so you don't internalize that it's your body that's the problem. We can find clothes that fit your body. And what other people think about you sexually is not your responsibility.
Yeah. I wonder, like, when do we get to the point where we move from, just not making a person feel shame to celebrating. Like, you know, I want to have, and maybe this is just my reading too much Judy Blume when I was, you know, a child or whatever, but I want to take my daughter on a trip to her first bra, and I want to celebrate her buds, and, you know, I want, like, I think we either have an experience of shame, or we have an experience of maybe not shame, but nobody talking to you about what's happening to your body. Like nobody celebrating when you get your cycle, or nobody, you know, like nobody is having that kind of conversation. And I think, I'm wondering when can we get that point, to that point?
Well, we got to talk about it first. And we still are very hush-hush. We still, listen, we're still sending people away for getting pregnant. You know what I mean? Like, we're literally, this is 2019, and we are still dragging people up to apologize to the church for getting pregnant out of wedlock. We still holding up people's memberships because they single mamas. We ain't hiring people.
All of that is in the book, by the way.
No, absolutely. And so, you know, we can't even get over ourselves enough to have that conversation. And here's the thing, I'm not sure that it's happening. It's going to happen, right? Because some of the people that talk to me about, I'm not sure why the church needs to talk about this, were my age.
Right.
So I'm like, well, snap. You know, I can't even, what are we going to do?
I think too, right, because not that all hope is lost for the older people, but some of them gonna come over, some are like, look, I'm already 2 steps to glory, I ain't got time to read, everything, that I
You got what you get,
what God gave, and I'm going on to see the Lord at the end is gonna be, right? So, and I get that, right? I'm not going to my great auntie and trying to change her mind, like, this is what it is at this point. But I think for those of us who are still here yet in the land of the living, and especially those of us who may be having kids or in mothering roles or in some kind of role where we are going to be helping to guide this next generation, I think the first thing we have to do is deal with our own stuff. Like we want to change stuff but not deal with the stuff that makes us think the way we think. And I get it, right? It's scary to shake the very foundation of who you are and why you think the way you think, and find out maybe you didn't actually think that, which I talk about in my chapter. Maybe I don't actually think that at all, right? And I also, and I say this all the time when we talk about, particularly when it comes to like spanking, the conversation about spanking and stuff, is like, we have to get past it. Just because it was done to you and you survived does not mean that it was good practice. Right? So just because you were taught that and you seemingly turned out okay,
That's usually not the truth.
does not mean that it was the best practice that could have been done. May not mean that it was bad, but it doesn't mean that you can't improve upon it. And it's very interesting to me that we will buy the next phone, we will get the latest computer, we will get the newest update on Instagram or whatever, even though we usually complain about that. But we will do all those things, but we will not be like, maybe there's some things about child rearing or about sex or about all these things that maybe we could tweak. Like maybe now we have more information. Maybe now we can tweak some of those things. It's like, no, it was good for me, and it'll be good for you. And I think we really have to sit down and ask ourselves, were those things good for us? And maybe some of it was, and maybe some of it could be tweaked.
And be really honest with our answers. Right? Because a lot of us think that we're okay, and we're not. Right? We think that, you know, because we're moving through life. I mean, it took me to almost turning 40 to be able to even reconcile that some of my behavior and my fears and the things that I was dealing with was a direct result of childhood trauma and direct result of being raped at 23. And these experiences helped to inform how I dealt with relationships and how I dealt with, you know, the experiences that I had. It took a very long time for me because I was going through my 30s and my 20s like, you know, nothing was wrong. I'm okay. You know, I came out pretty decent. I got this degree and I'm doing this, and this. And at the end of the day, you know, when things start to break down, it was like, oh, I'm not okay. right? And some of me not being okay is informed by what I was taught in the church. Now, here's the thing, and I know a lot of y'all might watching it. We're not saying the church was bad. There was no good stuff about the church. I mean, there was a lot of foundational stuff. The reason why we can all still call our people outside, and that's not, we want the church to be better. Outside of the church, I've had the most encounter with God, right? My biggest, most profound experiences and encounters with God were outside, and we got to do better. That's where I think we're going. Raina and Cindy, because y'all kind of quiet, I don't like this. So, what's interesting, the similarity between your two stories in the book is, Raina, you didn't come from a church background. You came to faith later on in your life. And Cindy, you said in your story that your church, your parents were like nominal, like they went on Easter and Christmas or whatever, but it wasn't like an active, like 4 days a week type of deal. And so I'm interested in knowing, both of you still kind of ascribe to Judeo-Christian, beliefs, and still got kind of caught up. Like when, you were talking about your experience of having children as a teenager, right, or having sexual activity early, and your mom kind of running you down the street to the church anyway, even though she ain't even really go there, but she's like, we need to go to somebody's church, right? What you do? You gotta go, get up there on that altar, right? So I'm interested in knowing, how you think that, how you ended up still in that same place, even though you didn't have that, maybe necessary foundation.
My mom is an interesting woman, and I guess she got to her wit's end as far as my being bad was concerned. Now, personally, I don't think I was being bad, and I think my sisters would attest to the fact that I really wasn't being bad. Sure, there were some things that I probably did that I should not have done, but it goes back to the talking to. Nobody told me there were things that I wasn't supposed to do. Maybe I was supposed to come straight home from school. Maybe I was supposed to wash the dishes. I don't know. But all those things do not add up to me getting run to some random church in West Philly. Having to put on these heels and this skirt set and
Getting dressed up and run to the church.
Early Sunday morning, I'm used to sleeping in, and having to experience. And we talked about this at the beginning of this. Having to experience the male-dominated atmosphere, because the 4 weeks that I went, I had to go to the altar, I had no idea what altar call was, and I didn't really know what prayer was, other than Judy Bloom, are you there, God, it's me, Margaret? I mean, that's where I learned about prayer. That's where I learned about prayer. I did not know what prayer was. I didn't know what any of that stuff was. You watch church scenes on TV or in movies, and it was weird to me. So ended up years later going to the church. Basically, I ended up at church because my husband's brother kept begging us to go, and I was just like, listen, we should just go so we can get him off our back. And had a good experience. Now, good experiences come and go because I'm currently not in church. Nobody say anything.
No.
People start sending you invitations on Sunday morning, like, you want to come right?
We talk about sex at my church.
I found myself, the longing to have something spiritual and the longing to have that connection with God is, I think, in most people. I'm not going to say it's everyone, because I know everybody doesn't believe in God or believe in Christ or whatever the case may be, but I think there is some longing to have some type of spiritual connection to something, whether you know what it is or not. And I think that was always there growing up, and that usually starts through our parents. And if our parents take us to church, and then you get all this mixed up information at church, or they don't take us to church, and then you get all this mixed up information about whatever that longing is, or you don't get any information at all, and you start trying to find it in all these random places or random people or random things. You know, there are people who end up using drugs or drinking, or whatever the case may be, as they say, the sins of the father are passed down. It's all that looking for that, trying to fill that void. And, you know, it's an ongoing journey, because I'm not saying I'm still looking, because I know I have that love, and I know that, you know, God exists, and I believe that I've been in a place where I can understand all that, and have felt it, and touched it, and experienced it. But that trip, that long trip trying to find it, is, it's something that needs to be cultured very early, and it needs to be explained and understood correctly, so that we don't have all of these young people, young women in particular, running around with these false views of what love and sex and church and an experience is.
It's running it all together.
And yeah, it runs together, and then we get all these confused messages, and then end up in these places of being Jezebels, or what's the whole binary? Said that? But then,
Well, it's either so there's no in between.
Right,
You're either
right,
a church
right,
girl or a hoe. Right? You know, and so like, you know, and there's so much along those spectrum, right?
Yeah.
You know, and
So much.
you know, Jesus hung out with a lot of hoes. He did.
Sure did.
You know.
and he said, I love them.
As they are. She's running the whole, I think she's in charge of.
Oh, Ray has. She's got Ray
Ray
has.
But them spies might have been hoes, because they knew where she was at.
You know what? I wanted to say this, and do we have questions? Any text messages come through? We're going to be taking questions from the audience and questions from you. Hopefully, we can see those. But the last thing I want to talk about is the very starting when I mentioned Me Too. The very real issue of, and let's just go there, like that Jezebel hoe designation, right? That's only given to women, right? Like we don't really assign those names to men, right? And
Maybe dipping into.
right, you know, and we see scandal after scandal after scandal, right? And yet, you know, scandal within the evangelical church, scandal, you know, and yet, you know, it's the woman that gets these labels. But what we don't often talk about is, you know, that promiscuity sometimes can be a result of sexual trauma. Can be a result of an introduction to sexual activity very early on, right? And so what happens to a young girl who has this happen to her, and then, you know, begins to quote unquote act out, right? And then it's almost like a doubling down of shame, right? So we have the shame of this event that happened to her, and then the shame of this reputation that she gets as a result of acting out. And no one is dealing with the trauma. Nobody, you know, I say in my introduction to the book that, you know, after my experience of molestation, nobody talked to me. Nobody, you know, it was just like, let's pretend, let's go to church, and let's pretend and put on our mask and act like nothing happened. There's no counseling. There's no, you know, help to distinguish these feelings that has been rose up, came up, provoked in me, right? Nobody had that conversation. And so I'd like for you guys, anyone who want to just jump out there and share, like, you know, what do we do? Like, how do we, or why don't we deal with the trauma first? Because they say 1 in 4 women, right? And for black women, that's 1 in 3 have experienced some kind of sexual assault, sexual trauma in their lives, right? I guess that's me at this table, right?
That's me.
And so we we keep, you keep kind of circling around, and then that promiscuous woman, girl, grows up to be grandmama in the church, policing bodies.
Because of that trauma.
Because of that trauma. And then she policing bodies, and then the little girl that she's policing ends up experiencing trauma, and it just happens all over again. What do we
It's a
do?
revolving door. But yes, I'm gonna hold that thought.
Okay.
I wanted to piggyback on the other question.
Sure.
Because, coming from, because for me, we're talking like in the 70s. And in the 70s, it wasn't cool yet to be saved. So, so my family going to church on Easter and Christmas, and I don't even remember. We used to go, and I think we were members of a church, when I was little. But it wasn't like it is now, what it became like in the 80s and in the 90s, where you just spent the night in the church.
Right.
So I grew up in the 70s and in the 80s, and when I got to high school is where I started having encounters with God, but it was because I was singing on the gospel choir in high school. So I was singing stuff. Yeah, come on now. In the church, in the gospel choir, don't have a clue as to what I was singing about. But, that's how I was introduced to the Lord and to Jesus. What is this Holy Spirit thing and all of this stuff?
Right.
And in that time, in the early 80s, salvation was like a fad. You saved, you saved was a thing, and people would get saved and scrub all their makeup off and put on if you had not been saved, sanctified, then you just want to hell. Period. So I got into it. I never got to the place where I was scrubbed. I didn't quite get there. Not that I was a makeup person, but I never got, as a teenager.
Legalistic. Yeah.
I never got legalistic. I never was feeling that. But still going back to what we're talking about now, I was still there. I was a morally good person. And deep down, I didn't know enough to even wonder about sex. It was still that thing that nobody talks about. You know what I mean? So
But you had the warm and fuzzies.
Had the warm and fuzzies.
You had the feeling. That's
And
the title of the
recognized
essay,
them. I recognized them when they came, which is not very often, but anyway. But that's all I knew. That's all I knew. You know what I mean? That's what I thought that whole sex thing was when you talk about it. And so that's what, nobody ever, no one. And I think, going back to the question that you just asked, is because of that trauma.
Yeah.
The people that taught us were traumatized. The people that taught, or that tried to teach us, or that didn't teach us, were traumatized. And the people that didn't teach them were traumatized. It probably goes all the way back to slavery. You know what I mean? When being a black woman was nothing but sexual trauma. That was your life every day. You know what I mean? So we're coming from this. And that's why we're here. And I think that we're so broken because we've never reckoned with that.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And we never talk about it.
It's those things that we never say.
Right.
And I think to go along with that, right, is that it almost, I think for some of the older generation, maybe even some of our generation, it's almost not talked about because it's been communicated in one way or another, whether from inside the church or in your family members or just society as a whole, that trauma was your fault. right? Or as a woman, that's your burden to bear. Like that's just what we experience as women,
right?
Yeah, right? Like
it's just cycle.
and so
it is what it is.
so I think we're not going to talk about something that is just part of your life's reality. Or if you bring it up, that's what I'm going to tell you. Child, this is just the burden of being a woman, right? And I think to some extent that plays a role into the policing, right? Because if I believe that my trauma was my fault, then my actual form of love and protection of you is to keep you from causing trauma to come to you. And so I'm not going to talk about it because I believe that if you don't put it out, like if we do everything to protect you from what you're going to bring to you, then we don't have to talk about it, right? But I believe that I brought that trauma to myself, and because I love you and I don't want you to experience what I experienced, I'm going to police you so you don't bring trauma to yourself, not knowing that it has nothing to do with the individual, but more to do with the perpetrator. But that's not the socialization. And I do think, in my conversations with older women, like they think that's love. Like they think that's love.
That's exactly coming from that place.
Yeah, it's like, because I don't want you to bring to you what I believe I brought to me.
Because that's what I was taught.
Right.
That's what I was taught.
Like I'm sorry. Like in my essay, I talk about me being molested at an early age, and I thought I was fine. And what I talk about is that good girl church thing that I was taught alongside this complicated relationship with sex, and me kind of being like, see, what the church taught me is sex is bad, and what my molestation taught me is sex is bad. Right. And so those two things kind of married together. And then, I'm like, okay, I'm the good church girl. I'm going to act right. I'm not going to have sex outside of marriage. Then I ended up having sex outside of marriage, but I didn't enjoy it. And so I just thought, oh, well, this is God. Like, this is how God's going to protect me. He's going to make sure that I don't enjoy sex until I get married. This is the way I formed it in my mind. You know what I'm saying? But I didn't know that all of that was trauma. I didn't know that. I didn't know that because no one told me that it was traumatic. And I went to the group therapy, and I did all of the stuff I was supposed to do. The state mandated, blah blah blah. I'm in there helping them girls. Like the girls, like my mom, blah blah. And I'm like, oh no, it's gonna be all right. Like I'm in there, what I'm saying, doing all that. And so she's a minister. You know what I'm saying? And I'm just in there like, girls, gonna be all right. And then and then it wasn't until I got into my 20s, and then it was, blown up when I got married. And then I had to have my friends on the phone with me talking about, girl, it's not your fault. You're gonna be all right. Because I thought I was fine. And I wasn't. But it was hiding behind that good church girl image that I had sort of put up, and I thought that it was God's divine protection. Yeah. You know what I mean? That I wasn't, enjoying sex or that, and then you don't realize, because again, you're taught in church and you're taught in the world that sex is for men. So I didn't even pay attention to my own body when I was having sex because I was performing for him. So then I didn't realize, oh snap, you tense, your whole body tenses up when you have sex. Oh, it does?
Is that supposed to happen?
Is that supposed to happen? You know what I'm saying? And it wasn't until, you know what I mean? But this is what I'm saying. Like, it wasn't until, I got married with somebody that I couldn't perform for. Because nobody else was paying attention. Because they was enjoying themselves. You know what I'm saying? And then I, ran into somebody who was like, you ain't gonna perform for me, so what's happening right now? What's that? Fall out of the rest of these things. What are you doing? You know what I'm saying? But, he was like, nah, like something is going on right now. We need to work through this. So, I think that even with the trauma, sometimes it's not promiscuity.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Sometimes it's an aversion.
Right.
But we're fine with the aversion. the church people are fine with the aversion because that lines up with whatever they do.
It makes you feel holy.
Right, because then it makes you see, right,
and valuable.
right, like me, I'm holding on to myself, you know what I'm saying? Me and my jacked up, traumatized self, you know what I'm saying? So, and then it would make me angry. I would hear people talk about, like even friends, they would talk about orgasms and stuff. Like, what's the talking about that? You know what I mean? Right. You know what I mean? And then I would be like, God, I don't understand. Why you letting them do that stuff? And I was getting mad. I was like, I don't understand. Right, she had such a great time. I'm holy. I'm trying to live right. And she out here just getting her life. And she had all the orgasms and all that. Like, this is not fair. So then you kind of create the story. Like, oh, so no, this is God. Right. And then, and it just falls apart. Like I said before, it falls apart. Sorry.
I think a lot of our problem starts with secrets.
Yeah.
Trauma
Let's make it sick.
is a secret. Secrets are toxic. And like you said, they will make you sick. I even think about, going to the doctor. How they always ask you about, any history of things in your family. And I struggle with trying to answer these questions because nobody said anything.
Right.
Like 15 aunts down the line could have had cervical cancer.
Right. And you would
But
never
no,
know.
She
fell asleep. She died in her
right.
sleep.
I was joking with somebody just recently. They were like, "Oh, something happened to his toe. His toe got cut off." It's the strangest thing that we will not pass on the good and the bad. And those secrets that are bad, like that trauma, like any type of history in a family of things that happen that could affect your future. Mental illness. That's a myth right there. Mental illness, because that ties to trauma. That can tie to sexual trauma as well, from either doing it or being a victim of it. And we need to stop keeping all these secrets because the secrets are not protecting. The secrets are not helping anybody. But it goes back to that shame piece, and it goes back to not wanting to embarrass the family, not wanting to embarrass this person and that person, and we got to keep our name clear, and don't talk about what's right. Don't talk about what goes on in here, and don't put our business out in the street, and that's not really what we have to do to share with the people that we love. That things happen that were not great.
Laundry here.
Because it just keeps repeating itself
just
over and over and over again.
Wonder why.
You're like, this is just our family.
Yeah.
Because we don't talk about it. We don't put it out there.
It
Like,
spills out anyway.
It does, in a bad way.
I'm a real church girl. These families be trying to hide all this stuff, and it be you on the church band talking about it.
The boys, we talking about it. Now we got social media. You send a Facebook message, girl, did you see your mug shot? It's still spilling. You might as well just talk about it.
It's spilling out anyway. Y'all come to church and everybody smiling in your face and be like, why they keep my weird?
But I think we feel like it's easier when it spills out like gossip, right? As opposed to spilling out like truth, like vulnerability, right? Like transparency, right? Where you actually have to feel. You have to hurt a little bit. You have to cry. You have to hold someone. Right? When we like, then we can kind of, that's still a masking.
Right. It's still a question. Did that really happen?
Right.
Right.
Yeah, you don't know.
You didn't hear it from me.
You have some people
Right.
you got some people like me that won't believe it. I don't
No, they didn't do that.
Right.
She ain't like that.
Tell the truth so you can control the story. That's always
Control the narrative.
It's going to be way bigger than what happened.
Well, I think that's what this book is about. Like, this book really is about, these free conversations here. Where we can jump from trauma to, the whole binary to 14 orgasms, back to we can talk about that and we can feel okay. Like we can leave here feeling a little lighter, right? So what I want to do now is if we have questions from the audience, we'll take questions from the audience. Did you get any text messages? Okay, so I don't know if anybody else. Many of our writers are on our comment section right now, so they will be also talking to you. If you have questions or anything you want, they can go in and help you out as well. Because I can't see the comments.
It is a comment.
There is one? Okay.
She just wanted to know what the 14 orgasms.
Who shared this lovely bit of information for me. And I'm going to ask Alexis, if she's watching this, to share that information with the person who commented.
Share with all of us.
And can I add, like, so we're going to get free, right? There are people who go to school for a very long time,
right, there you go,
who study sexuality, sexuality. I have two Lyme sisters who have sexuality PhDs. This is what they do. They do therapy with people around their sex and sexuality. And if you were like, I got questions, like, you pick up a book, don't be scared, you don't have to put on shades and go to the sexuality portion of the bookstore and find that Amazon, just go look up some books. Right. But also there are trained professionals who aren't going to judge you, and you can be very open with them, like, I'm a Christian, this is my faith tradition, and they're trained to be able to help you work through all these parts of your identity, but also talk to you about these things. And they're not just, I think a lot of times we think those people are only dealing with people with, maybe who are trying to figure out their sexual identity, or they've had some kind of sexual trauma, but it also could be married people, women with kids who are trying to figure out how all this stuff works. How does this stuff work now? That a little human passed through it, right? And so I would encourage you to search out those people. I also encourage you to search out Black women, because we have, very unique understandings and dealing with the world around our sex and sexuality and our bodies. But like, go talk to somebody who's trained to help you work through these things, because you're gonna read them 14 things and not know where some of them body parts are, right? And so, and you're gonna be in the bathroom, like, So I also encourage you to seek out some professionals to help you. You don't have to have a dysfunctional sex life to go talk to a sex therapist. Right.
As a matter of fact, it's probably best that if you don't have a dysfunction, that you have somebody to check in with.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, we can all learn new things, right?
Yeah.
So, there's that. Are there any questions here? Anybody would like to comment or share in our live studio audience?
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm wondering, just a scenario for you guys. A pastor or your pastor calls you into his office or her office and wants to know, hey, I saw your essay. What would you be desiring from them at this point?
That's a good question. So if you didn't hear that, she posed the scenario of a pastor calling one of us into their office, and they've read our essay. What would we want from our pastor in that moment? Who'd like to take that on?
I would want curriculum. I want some curriculum, age-appropriate curriculum from, we may not have to go as young as preschool, however, maybe a step above preschool, 7, 8, and I would want us to, we need some type of biblical, we can base it in the Bible, because there's a whole book. There's a whole book, Song of Solomon, that's in the Bible that everybody just ignores as though it's not there. But I would want some curriculum. I would want some real sex education that incorporates body parts, your 2,000 parts, but also from a biblical perspective that you can marry them, but balanced, and get off this. Don't do it, because that ain't working apparently. I would want some curriculum, and I think that, and I would, you know, not, I mean, I'm in a unique position because I used to be a youth minister, and I'm, you know, I'm a licensed minister. I would build the curriculum. If you can't build it, I would build it. You know what I mean? Just so that we can start talking about it, so that there is, because we're talking about everything else. We're talking about forgiveness, and we're even now like, oh yeah, you know, we need to start teaching these young people about their finances. Yeah, like, yeah, let's also start teaching them about their bodies and not being ashamed. And if you're gonna do the whole, you know, and it needs to be balanced. That's my big thing. It just needs to be balanced. Like, what's good for the goose needs to be good for the gander, like, and vice versa. Like, if you're gonna be out here, if your theological position is that no sex before marriage, I want you pushing that messaging as hard as with the boys as you do with the girls.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? If that's your theological position, that's what I would want to see, is some Sunday school Bible study type stuff.
But you know what, to add on to that, because I agree with you, I also think that there are things about sex and sexuality that the Bible can't answer. And I want us to be okay with that. And I want us to be okay with a lot of that gray area. And because what we try to do sometimes is we want to take that area and push it black or push it white.
That's true.
Right? And eisegete scripture, right? And twist scripture to try to fit, you know, when it really doesn't fit. And contextually, that's not even what that was happening at that time. Right? And so I would want us to just say, you know what, sis, I don't have an answer for that biblical answer. But here's what I feel the Holy Spirit is saying, or here's what's specific to you in your situation in this moment. Like, or here's what I went through when I encountered that same feeling. Right? Because those are valid. God uses that. Right? Like, there may not be a scripture and verse in the story to line up on, you know, a particular, or if you get some kids like my child and a lot of these kids that are coming up nowadays, they're going to say, well, you know what? Truth be told, Mary Magdalene and Rahab and so-and-so, and then I don't see anywhere where premarital sex actually comes up scripturally in the Bible. Right? Like, I don't even see that. And I don't think, Mommy, I looked up the Greek of fornication, and it actually doesn't mean that. What are you going to do then?
Exactly.
What are you going to do then? When the Greek of fornication doesn't line up with what you're being taught.
But why can't we? This is what I'm saying. Like, why do we then try to dumb down? And this is what I have a problem with. Why do we dumb down the scriptures when it doesn't fit what we wanted to say? Like, then
because we've made God in our own image.
Right. But so that's what I'm saying. Like, when we talk about really trying to go through the Bible, that stuff needs to be said. Like, you know what I mean? Because that's not something that we were taught.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, that wasn't.
Because we'll take literal interpretations of scripture.
Yeah.
Right?
Like, so I'm just. We just need to really read and study.
Well, also, some of these pastors gotta get more bold. And this is, my pastor's friends gonna come from me in my inbox. I see it coming. But there's a lot of pastors preaching stuff they don't even believe. Like, when you talk to them one-on-one, they're like, oh yeah, I was seminary, I stopped believing that stuff like 20 years ago. But I can't preach that in my pulpit on Sunday, or my offering's gonna be low, or people are gonna leave my church. Like literally. So some of these folks gotta get more bold. And maybe it ain't in the pulpit on Sunday, but at least let's start a Bible study. Right. But that's the thing that I think burns me up. Like, and of course, like, I just have a really random circle of a lot of pastor friends, but there's some pastors who don't believe this stuff for themselves. But they're afraid to preach what they actually believe. Because they don't feel that the people are going to receive it. And if they're in a system or a church where their livelihood is tied to people coming to church and putting an offering in that plate, they're not going to put their kids eating at risk to preach a progressive gospel. And that is where
I need for that faith to strengthen.
and so to that extent of like, I want more bold leadership. And I mean, that's from pastors, there's bishops who are out here who don't believe certain things that their denominations are pushing forward. And I get it gets messy. I'm a church girl that was in the org side of the church. I know that it gets messy when you start rocking the boat, and especially again, if your livelihood is tied to this institution, that's scary. It's easy for me to be like, well, man, say what you feel, because my check comes from Old Dominion University and the state of Virginia. So I get it, but I do think like we're sitting as parishioners and we're believing that you believe the stuff and you're supposed to be the man or woman of God or person of God that is supposed to be speaking God-inspired instruction to us. So if you're saying it, to some extent, I'm going to believe it. And if I'm a person who's not going to study on my own, that's it. That's the truth, right? This is shaping my life. And so for you to not believe the things that you are saying, that's dangerous. Like, it's almost malpractice.
It is malpractice.
Right? And so that's what I want that. And I would want more churches to partner with sex therapists and sex educators. Bring them into our churches or bring our people to them.
Yeah.
There's no reason if we're not trained to talk about it, again, there are people who are. Yeah. We're so scared to bring people in our church that may or may not be Christian or whatever, but these are people who are trained to talk about these and help people talk about this, especially when you got people in your church who are dealing with sexual trauma. Your pastoral counseling class may not have equipped you
at all
to deal with that and to broker that conversation. So partner with these organizations in your community is also a good way to get to know people in the community, because you need them people come to your church anyway. To partner with these people so that you can focus on the health and the healing of the people in your church as well.
That's good. Yeah. That's so good. That's so good. Any other questions? Yes.
I'm a little nervous right now.
That's okay.
I don't really share my story too much. My mother's starting to get a little bit of it as I get older. But for me, I went to church. I've been going to church since I was 2 years old. And now I'm at the point in my life where I'm not in church as well right now. And part of my reasoning is because of I guess part of my story. Like, I had some things happen that a lot of people don't know about. After that, I went to my promiscuity stage, where I did a lot of things, and it was what it was, and it happened. It is what it is. And then I had my son. And after having my son at 22, I was in church when I had him. The church knew when I was pregnant. They knew when I had the baby. They knew all of that. And I remember it was kind of half and half. Like, I somewhat felt okay with what happened with me having my son, and then I also felt weird. Like, I remember specifically a time I was in the hospital, and someone called me on the phone, and they asked me did I know who my son's father was, and it was just like, I'm sorry, the whole talk is making a little bullshit off. Because like I said, I don't share my story. I don't tell other people what I've dealt with. In that moment, I was a little taken aback, but I couldn't be upset because of my past and what I knew that I went through, what I knew that I've done.
You could be upset.
I knew I could, but at that time I was ashamed. It was like,
right.
I kind of couldn't be upset. But I guess my question now is, now that I'm older, I'll be 28 next month. My son is 5. He doesn't go to church with me. He goes to church with his father, which I don't really like too much because they got their own stuff going on over there. How do I turn my mindset around to be able to feel comfortable to go back to church, despite of what I've been through, despite of my past, despite of the stages that I've had? And still trying to get over those stages, because I still had my moments where I'm good and I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that, and then I had my moments where I'm like, oh, I'm still getting it popping all the time. So it's like, how do you change your mindset to go to get back to that place where you once were?
First of all, I don't even want to tell you that you need to go back right now. I think that there's a healing process, right? It's not that you won't go back. And I understand the idea of wanting your child to be, to have that experience and take your child to church. But there's some healing that has to happen, because that's what we call church hurt, where somebody has really, caused a breach. At the same time, what you have to know is that none of those people are God. That God loves you, right? And He wants a relationship with you. And He loves everything about you. He knows you didn't catch Him off guard, and I don't usually use the masculine, try not to use the masculine framing for God, but God is not surprised by you, and there's nothing that is in your life, so-called promiscuity or whatever, that God is holding against you. And that you have to let that settle in your spirit, and get some peace about that. Because part of it is shame at work, right? So that shame is, telling you that what they're thinking and what they're saying is true. And so you have to get clear that it's not, and that you are deeply loved, right? And then you enter that space with more confidence, because it doesn't really matter what you think about me or my child, because I'm not here for you, right? I'm here for this relationship and not this. And until y'all can get y'all together, they ain't gonna never be this, right? And so that's what I'm saying, because church is about relationships and it is about community. So you have to, that's what I'm saying, it might not be time yet. Right? And it may not be, you may have to find a space, a safe place to be able to live, where you're not going to be, judged. That's my take.
And I've been there. And the wording that you use, I was listening to you, and what I want you to know is that God loves you. I want you to get that despite thing out of your head. Because it's like, well, I did this and this, and I know God loves me despite. No. All of that stuff that is going on, it's like you are zeroing in on behavior. Like, you are like, I did this, and how could God love me because I did, and because this happened, and because it happened over and over and over again, and see how could He love somebody. But that's when we start shaping God in our image, right? Because because humans got that conditional type love. Humans have that, like, yeah, I'm gonna love you until you do this, and then and okay, but I'm gonna forgive you that one time, but you did it again. Oh, I don't know, and I'm gonna start holding myself back from you a little bit. Oh, you did it again. Oh, and that's not how God loves us. He doesn't love us despite. He doesn't. It's not like, oh, okay, I know you got all of this stuff. His love, like I'm sorry, because I know what that is. I know what that feels like, because you feel like I'm just messing up, and I can't get it right. I can't get it right. So I can't have a relationship because I can't get it right. And the truth is that none of those people that are at that church are getting it right either. Everybody at this table ain't getting it right.
She called you because somebody called her.
Right? You know what I'm saying? Nobody at this table, nobody. I don't care what kind of mask they put on. I don't care what kind of church hats they put on or what stockings they wear. Nobody is getting it right.
I know that
Sorry.
that's okay. Anybody in any church that has time to sit around and call folks some kind of question, you don't need to be at that church anyway. So if the phone call isn't about seeing how you are, making sure you're okay,
Right.
do you need anything?
Right.
And I'm gonna pray for you.
Right.
Then that's when you decide I'm going. Because if they should be praying in their closet, doing the things that God says to do to create these relationships and those relationships.
Yeah.
And that's what church is supposed to be about. And I know we joked a little bit earlier about gossiping and whatnot, but you know, that's not even what it's supposed to be about. Yeah, we're gonna gossip in our kitchens and, you know, do the stuff on social media. But I mean, you know, I'm not in church too, so.
But church is here. We in church right now.
He's what I was doing. Other than the petty side of me says, get an octogenarian friend because they know all the dead bodies are. Tell them that this person they will ruin their life. I'm still striving towards the mark. The other side of me would I would ask you this question. You say you want to go back to church. Why?
I think most of it was because I miss that fellowship part.
Mm-hmm.
So I know, because I grew up in church, I know that I've had, like you said, Tracy, I've had experience. Most of my profound experiences have been by myself. Even at a young age, like 14, 15, I was by myself having experiences. Sometimes in church dancing or something, but mostly it was in my own private time. But I miss having that other part, that other thing to go to, that other, you know.
And it's a part of who you are.
Yeah,
because you grew up in it.
That's who I was. Yeah, that's what.
So what I would encourage, right, is to start at the root of that, right? Before we get to, I need to find a church, I need to find fellowship.
Right.
That's the first step, right? And so I think kind of going in line with what Tracy is saying is that you need to find some people you can fellowship with, right? And not just, I think we throw that word around a lot and it usually means eating chicken. I do believe there was a chicken at the manger. I believe there was. But I think you find some people who are like-minded, who are going to love you, who have the spirit of Christ in them, and that you can start that fellowship outside of the four walls of the church. Because once you have that, then you can start to think about getting into a larger fellowship, right? Because what can make the larger fellowship challenging is not having that fortified, intimate fellowship. And that's the stuff that lets people think they can say crazy stuff to you, right? Because my friends will tell you, their little church stories, we be ready to roll up. Like, I would go to the church. Who was it? And I would which one of them was it? And pray for them at the same time. But I think the fellowship, and I think we're designed, God designed us to be in community. God wanted community, right? So I think start there, start at the core of what you're looking for. Because if you don't start at the core, no church is going to satisfy, because you still got to heal, like Tracy said. So you're going to go in, like, I want fellowship, and the church going to give you church.
Right.
They don't give you church.
Right.
And then the first time somebody does something that pricks that thing in you that takes you back, you're gonna be like, this is why I ain't gonna come back to this.
And you're not gonna have anything to fall back on. You're not gonna have any friendships, any relationships to bring that to. Right.
So start with that. I would start with finding fellowship, building that up, and then once you start to be healed and fortified, then we can start to look for a place, a community that is called church, that you can find a larger fellowship with, right?
Yeah. And receive your healing.
Yeah.
Because it's like you are inadvertently wanting to stay in that hurt place, but you heal, you're whole, you are complete. He's given you everything that you need to move forward. And sometimes the churches, church is like being in a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
When things go bad, y'all break up sometimes.
You know what I mean?
They can hurt your feelings, you know, and you roll your eyes when you think about them sometimes. So sometimes you gotta, you know,
Take some space.
you gotta take some space. And you in a relationship that's been hurt. You know, it hurt you. So you gotta heal, and you gotta receive your healing and stop worrying about what other people are thinking, what they're saying, because them jokers gonna be talking until Jesus comes back.
And it ain't got nothing to do with what you do.
Absolutely
Them people
not.
just need something to talk about. And you
Yep.
can be living the best
And they stuff is boring.
righteous
Yeah.
life. And then they be like, oh, she's so
That's
hungry.
right.
She's so
Whatever. They always so don't worry, you know, and just really focus on getting your healing and knowing who you are
Mm-hmm.
and knowing how much you're loved.
So good.
You know, be the apple in his eye.
It sounded like that was a bone collector anyway, so just somebody
Yeah.
looking to take some information.
Right.
You should have asked her.
Shade on
I'm
her.
guessing it wasn't her. If she didn't have father picture. I'm a real church girl. I got some things you can say to that.
And don't rush back. Like I took 3 years, 2-3 years off of church.
Yeah, that's how long it's been.
Yeah, I took 2-3 years off of church, and in that time found Jesus.
Yeah.
Because I had lost him trying to do church.
Sometimes he wants you to excel.
Yeah.
So he'll cause those things to happen, or he'll allow those things to happen so he can bring you to him.
So you good.
You all right?
Yeah.
You good, girl?
You good. Because of, not in spite of.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
get
Right.
you.
Good.
We got another question.
Do we have
You
another
need an
question?
organ.
Yes, go ahead.
So I wanted to just kind of get back to the pastor's being whole, and how you addressed it. I totally agree. And the thing that's so interesting right now to me is that we're in a time it's a very eggshell time in religion,
Absolutely.
right? And so the new generations, I don't remember when I was coming up, I don't remember having so many options outside of Christianity.
Right. Right.
You know,
That's true.
and it's so crazy to me, like just how it seems like they're just so available and always in your face. I mean, my email just fills up with all kinds of stuff, and people are always just talking to you about, it's everybody's doing something different, right?
Mm-hmm.
So my question is, in that, do you feel moral standards are all taught, or do you feel that we all have some kind of common thread that happens? And this is a theological, I guess, but
Yeah.
is there a common thread that happens where all of us will sit and say, that's wrong,
I think part of morality is defined by culture in society, right? So what we would call wrong today in America in 2019, in 400, AD, in the Middle East, looked entirely different, and a lot of it is shaped by culture, it's shaped by, like you were saying, all of the options. Well, that's happened because there's access now to information that we didn't have access to. We couldn't just go online and look like Buddhism, and we couldn't do that, right? And so that access is actually made it a different experience. And so how we define right or wrong is going to look different. So I don't even know if it's like this core, sense. It's more of environmental. It's about how we are raised. And then there's this, I do think that at our core, there is an understanding of humanity and who we are as human beings. But I don't like the binary of right or wrong, because that has shifted over thousands and thousands of years, right? Even biblically, we see a significant difference, right? I mean, I love a good shrimp, right? You know, but at a particular point in time, if I went straight to hell, right? You know, like so. Right, yeah, right. You know, so I think that's how I would answer the question.
Yeah, I would agree. I think morality in the very technical sense of the term is subjective. I think it's subjective to time and place. I think it's subjective to culture. I think it's subjective to socialization. Right? I mean, there are plenty of people who thought slavery was right. Exactly. Right? Justifiably, morally. Right? Right? And so, there's people who still think it was right. And so I think.
Is it because you feel like they felt like they were punishing us? That it was
no,
right?
I think they felt the Bible told them that they were superior, and it was their job to help us, reign over us.
Present day truth.
Right, and I think, I also think it was free labor, and so you got to justify, getting this out of it, right, and making your money. So I think the whole idea of morality is just subjective. It's just wholly subjective.
Which is why you can't legislate it. I'm sorry.
Right.
Go ahead.
I do think, as a person who believes we are created by God and created in the image of God, and that there's a spirit being within all of us, I do believe there is a sensibility in us to be sensitive to justice and things that are unjust. Now, how we make sense of it is free will, right? But I think that God has created a mechanism in us to sense things, and then gives us the free will to figure out how to make sense of it, whether that is through discernment, whether that is through reading a book, whether that is through being taught things. But I do think there is something core, because if I believe that we have spirit beings, I have to believe that there is a mechanism in there that stirs up this sense of something just or unjust. But then we live in a world as a human body and human mind where we have to make sense of it. And I think that's where your faith, whatever that is, or your spiritual identity, then plays a role in how you form and shape that sense that's already inside of you to make sense of what is moral and just. And I think we all have that. I think we all have that sensibility.
So you think some people ignore it? They just ignore that sensibility?
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's your choice. I think when we get scary in the church, we talk about a choice. Like, Jesus was like, follow me and walk away. He wasn't like, follow me. You know what I'm saying? Right? Like, I'm going to go. You can come.
If you want, if you don't, I'll stop walking.
I got 33 years. That's it. So I think people choose to ignore it, or people are socialized to become numb to it.
But you know, sometimes it's completely different in cultures. True. You point out. But this is something that is not necessarily spiritual. But it's a thing, like dance. Dance in the United States. When we see people doing twerking type of gyration type of stuff, we're like, ooh, that is so nice. They should be ashamed. You know what I mean? That's not something that you do in the church.
Right.
You don't gyrate. You go over to Liberia.
Right.
Right.
That's the dance.
Right.
They can be in the church.
Yeah.
Right.
And they are grinding.
Right.
Because that is the way that they dance.
Right.
You know what I mean? So we would go over there and be like, oh my God. You know what I mean? But they're praising the Lord.
Yeah.
That's the way that they dance. We've turned it into something else.
Because we sexualize.
We've sexualized that dance too. So, and you know sex is huge. You know what I mean? Once we put that on it, it's like, whoa. You know, so, it really depends on what it is.
Right.
So.
Yeah. I shut it down, ignore it, or socialize, or they just create a hierarchy of importance.
That's true.
Right? It's like, you know, I do feel like that woman, you know, being shot by that police officer is unjust, but on the scale of justice, I'm gonna put it here because there's other things that I benefit from that is greater than that. Right?
Right.
You know, so I think that, you know, while it's there, it's a sensibility that we all have, you make choices as to, you know, how you want to reason it, like you said. I think, did any other questions come up? No? Okay, so I feel like we've gone like very long. But I think it was so good, and I just wanted to just, you know, publicly thank every single one of you for being and having this conversation and opening up, you know, cracking up, you know, a vein and opening up your heart and sharing and being as willing to be transparent as you've been. Thank you so much. Thank you for traveling up here. Yes. And we will actually be taking this discussion on the road. So you can look for us in Raleigh. I know that's going to be coming up soon. We're looking at Baltimore and DC and some other places. So we will be having these conversations. If you have a church or if you have an organization or you know that you want us to be as, you know, if your church is okay with us talking about 14 orgasms, then allow us. We're welcome to, you know, come and talk about this. In the meantime, go get Sex and the Church.
Yes.
Go get that book. It will bless your life. And go to newseasonbooks.com or nsbooksandmedia.com. All our social media, all of our Facebook, like our pages. And go cop that book and tell us what you think about it. So thank you.
Thank you, Tracy, for bringing us all together, and even the idea for this book. I think it's amazing, and I know some of the people I know who've read it it's really touched them, and they felt like they saw some stuff in the book and stuff. Thank you for having the vision and bringing us all together.
Yes.